everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullish Show. Today with me, Monika Rogers. Now, Monika is dialing in from a distant part of the USA, which is Wisconsin, which is north of Chicago, just to put it in perspective, if you don't know. I had to ask her because I'm from Australia, and I do know where a few places are in the USA, but I hadn't heard of Wisconsin, but she provided a guide for me. Anyway, I digress, but thank you everyone for being here. We're going to have a chat about the intersection of AI and humanity. And Monika's from, we're going to talk a bit more of that in a minute, but Monika is the growth strategy VP at CMB, which is a top US insights and analytics firm that provides world-class market research across media, entertainment, culture, technology, financial services. That sounds like they do everything, but it's not true. Anyway, prior to joining CMB, she had a role in Illuminas as head of client services and operations from 2022 to 2024. From 2014 to 22, she was an entrepreneur, raised over $2 million funding to build an innovative SaaS platform, Digisite, with both a consumer-facing insights community and a B2B testing analytics platform. The Digisite platform was sold to QuestionPro in August 2022 and integrated into their customer experience research portfolio. For that, she had built Fountainhead Brand Consulting from 2007 to 2014. That was a boutique innovation and brand consulting firm. Clients included Organic Valley, US Bank, and Kohler. Core services included strategic insights, uncovering new market opportunities, brand positioning, new product strategy. The research methods include segmentation, conjoint, ethnography, online communities, and brand tracking. Fountainhead was sold to regional ad agency in 2015. So to make it simply distill that, Monika is a hybrid between an entrepreneur and a senior executive who seems to be very curious about getting data and research insights to make a difference in the world. Welcome to the show, Monika. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a delight to be here.
So, Monika, when I'm curious about why people start their journeys and then where they go from there. It's a little bit like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey is, and one of the things I love about Joseph Campbell is he said, none of us have an inbuilt, mission in life or a purpose really. He said, you find that by following your bliss, which often is your curiosity. So can you tell me what started your journey into the industries, the university degree you did, and you told me you get bored quickly, and quickly I mean by every 3 years you seem to move on, but we're being general here. So what were you curious about as a teenager that led you to start your university degree? And let's take it from there.
As a teenager, I thought I was going to be an international correspondent. I did not get into the college I wanted to get into, and so I needed to get to plan B. So I worked full-time through undergrad, got a business degree because that's what my parents did. Like I had two choices, business or engineering. That was it, at least in my parents' eyes. And I was in undergrad and I took this class and it was called New Product Development. And in it, there was like a little study where they said you could ask people the similarity of cars. And based on asking similarity of cars, you could determine a segmentation and a map of cars in the marketplace. And from that, you can derive the attributes of those car brands. And I was like blown away, right? Like, you can do what? You don't have to ask somebody a direct question to get a direct answer. There's all these new, interesting analytic ways to approach the world. And that's what gave me the research bug. And at that point, I kind of approached my professor and said, how do I get into this career related to market research? And went on to get my degree and start in that world. As you said, the journey didn't end there. I think I was very fortunate coming out of undergrad. Before I started grad school, I was working at an engineering company. I was doing sales. I helped them invent a new product. It was really exciting. But I was on my way to get my market research degree. So I went and did that. And I said, I can do this anywhere, right? Because that company was like, hey, you want to do marketing? Get an engineering degree. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, right? But there's this thought that in order to sell something, you have to be an expert at it. And so I'm like, well, I could sell toothpaste. I could sell anything. So I went to General Mills and I did marketing research there, loved it. But I wasn't a fit for big company kind of culture. Was really had the bug to start my own business, but was a little afraid to do that. So I went to a small ad agency and did that. And it kind of evolved its way into ultimately starting my own business, starting my own consulting, and starting a tech company, which was really, really fun. And to your point, after 8 years running a tech company and selling it, I'm not a rinse and repeat kind of person. Like, what's the next adventure? So here I am at CMB, really trying to take a lot of the learning that I've gotten from building a technology company into that organization to help them build solutions, market, and sell those solutions to the world. So it's a pretty fun place along the path.
Cool. So you're really trapped in market research almost from your university days, aren't you? Really? But does that mean that you're quite curious about the business world and how it operates, and what are the drivers for business?
I think that's what foundationally like market research does, right? I mean, it allows us to figure out what is the question, what is the opportunity, what is the challenge, and how might you approach solving it. But being an entrepreneur, I had the opportunity to be arms and legs and do that, right? And figure out how to run that company and run a business. And so you learn a lot about that. And I think this role is a hybrid of that, because you're seeing the company's vision, you know where the company is trying to go, and you're trying to figure out how to get there, and you're using all the tools at your disposal. So I don't do market research in my role, but the company expertise is market research. And so it allows me to kind of tap into my knowledge of the industry while still doing more kind of leadership kind of work.
So, pre-conversation before we hit record here, you mentioned that you really wanted to get into growth. You didn't want to be doing operational type stuff like, the nuts and bolts. So it sounds like you like the more strategic, big picture game instead of the nuts and bolts. Is that correct? And growing the company.
Exactly. To me, that's the exciting part. I mean, the nuts and bolts all have to happen, and you have to find the right team around you to get all of that done. But for me, the thing that gets me up in the morning is that challenge. What's the next challenge? What's the problem to be solved? And what are the insights I need to get there? And then what's the strategy? And how do I put the right people in the right place to play the game of chess, right? And get to the finish line.
Right. Okay. So you've done, let's go back to your company that you built this SaaS platform. Digisite, is that how it's pronounced, or Digisite?
Digsite.
Digsite. Okay. So that was a SaaS platform, was that a monthly subscription, annual subscription site that customers signed up for to do their own type of analytics and research? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was. It still exists as a platform, and basically what we built it to do was to help company get insights faster. So we were looking at kind of, I think, as you were telling me about how you started in your kind of current journey, we were looking at the world of social media and realizing that market research needed to operate differently, right? And at that time, a lot of interviews or research was done one-on-one, over the phone.
Yes.
Or in person in focus group facilities. And we wanted to create a social media style platform to do that. But instead of a long-standing online community that might take weeks to set up and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, we wanted to have that be very instant, right? So you could quickly say, hey, I'm thinking about this new flavor of ice cream. You could test that overnight in a platform. You could find your participants. You could engage with them in a social media style kind of conversation, and boom, you have the results, right? And so that was the platform. It was at first kind of sold on a monthly subscription, but which transitioned to annual subscriptions and larger organizations. So we were selling more large contracts where people were doing this on a weekly or monthly basis.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've been involved with a company called Shuttle Rock, New Zealand company, 300 staff now, which we've moved from a project by project basis to a subscription model. And just like we've moved to more enterprise rather than the small to medium business, which tend to churn a little bit more. So I don't know what you discovered, but it's interesting that everyone's tried to move, to more a software as a service type model, subscription rather than one-off projects. They tend to get better valuations when they get acquired or if they go and float in an IPO. And there's also all sorts of names around that now. So, for example, Shutterstock, who I've been involved with, was on the board of for a long time, they've called it creative as a service. So that's rather interesting. But I digress. So let's move on to CMB, and you're in growth now, and you've just released a new product service, which you've called AI plus HI, which I'm going to explain those two acronyms. AI, we know all about. Okay. HI is human intelligence. So sounds like it's the intersection of artificial intelligence and human intelligence to actually help us make wiser decisions. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's exactly the concept. I think what we recognized is one of the first most obvious use cases for Gen AI and AI generally, but Gen AI in particular has been market research, right? People are like, hey, I want to prompt and say, so I want to market to millennials age such and such to such and such, and here's the profile. What should I do, right? And Gen AI will give you an answer, or they'll give you an ad campaign, or they'll give you whatever. So I think there was this initial kind of idea, right, that market research could just be replaced by AI. In fact, we can just create synthetic people, and we can ask them survey questions, and blammo, we've got all of our insights right there, right? And I think the way that CMB is looking at it is to say, well, kind of, but not really, right? I think there's a lot more context, a lot more nuance, and to be honest, a lot of value that Insights has brought to decision makers over the last 25 years. So the question is, how do you use AI capabilities to level up the research that we're doing? And I feel like there's a lot of emphasis by a lot of SaaS platforms to drive speed and efficiency, which is super important. We're looking at how can we leverage all of that res tech. There's 1,500 market research res tech tools, by the way, 1,500. Wow. So how do you vet through 1,500 market research res tech tools, all of which I'm sure have adopted some kind of AI into their tech right at this point, and figure out what's the best of the best? And then how do you combine that with the proprietary methods that we've created over time to create something better, right? That gets us faster and better insights. And so that's really the AI plus HI combo, is recognizing that our clients don't have time to bring in and vet all that res tech. They may bring in some big players, right, like a Qualtrics that has some AI capabilities, but they're probably going to continue to need expertise to really maximize the research that they're doing. And so our focus is really on building those kind of custom solutions using the latest AI technology.
So this service you built, is it a product that you give to a client or you use it internally? How does it describe how the product works in the market?
Yeah, we're definitely, I would say, at our core, a services kind of organization. And so we're at this point, right, most of what we're doing is using the AI tools on behalf of our clients. So they may come to us with a problem, say, I want to prove out that these events that I'm doing are effective. And we'll say, okay, we're gonna build these kind of conversational chatbots surveys that you could put right in your event venue, and it's going to automate the learning. But by the way, you're going to have instant access to the results. So we're doing a lot of the kind of consulting work to get things set up. But there are places in the process where they may have direct access to the platform that we're using in order to interface with data, prompt it with questions, things like that. So it's kind of a combination. But at the end of the day, we're not a tech company that's providing a SaaS solution. We're We're a consulting company that's embedding SaaS into our solutions.
Right. So you basically have done some research in the marketplace and you've done all the hard yards, and you actually have maybe picked several platforms that you use to help you get the results you need. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then we're kind of constantly doing that, right? So we've got a team that's just sitting there checking the next platform and the next platform or the next update or iteration on the platforms that we have, because that's the challenge right now, right? We're not at a point in the life cycle of AI that you can just pick something and then it work for a year or 2 years or 3 years. It may work, but it may not be optimal. So we're having to kind of constantly vet and find new and better solutions. And that is a part of the value proposition as well, is you kind of work with us and come with us on that journey and not have to do all of that homework yourself.
Yeah. And the interesting thing in the marketplace with AI is I'm seeing really two marketplaces. You got the bigger companies that are adopting AI into their existing solutions. And then you got the ones that are just pure startups, like starting with a clean sheet and going. So, and that raises a whole lot of questions too, because I did some research recently of my own, which is my research is writing an article and then publishing it on my blog and going, this is research. No, I don't say it's a research, but I'm just saying, well, this is my curiosity. I just did some hard yards during the last week, and what I'm seeing is that in the world of AI, because it requires so much training, so much processing power, so much data center power, that it appears that the bigger players are maybe poised to win the game of AI. And I'm sure in the marketplace, you're dealing with AI market research firms and the intersection of those, the human and the machine. Are you seeing the bigger players as being better positioned to actually win the game in this particular market segment you're working in, which is market research and AI?
Uh, yes. I mean, the fact of the matter is that one, our clients are very large organizations, right? So we're working with very big companies who, even in order to vet a vendor like ours to use an AI solution within our stack, we have to be ISO certified, we have to follow, we have to meet certain requirements. So the legal and regulatory with AI, right, is going to just keep ratcheting up, and therefore you have to have a base level of research that of capabilities and resources to do that. That gets harder and harder for that independent consultant or freelancer or small research company to have those capabilities, unless you're financially backed to start up and you've got a couple $1 million behind you to get you off the ground. But it's very hard to just enter the market, maybe as market research companies did of past. And then I think the other thing is there's going to be winners and losers in this space, right? So we see tech platforms growing at a 13-14% rate within the market research industry, and the consulting companies growing at a 3% rate, okay? There's going to be winners and losers in here. And there are a lot of companies who've had layoff and downsize over the last couple of years. So the question is, who is going to win? And the companies that are going to win are the ones that can invest additional resources to build new capabilities. And the ones that are going to lose are those that are so cash poor, right, that they don't have time to build new capabilities and they're just continuing to deliver what they have for the past 25 years.
Yeah. You've got sort of like the people that are coming from what I call old thinking, and then you got the ones that start with a clean sheet. And that's really fascinating. But I think the big versus small is pretty interesting to watch it play out. And for example, Mustafa Suleyman, that was behind DeepMind, he actually started a $1.5 billion startup to create a product. And he basically, I think it was 18 months in, threw up his hands and joined Microsoft, and that team all moved over there. They weren't bought, they acquired the team.
Got it. Yeah. What do they call it? Aquahire or yeah. There's a term for it now. But there's companies out there that's exactly what they do. They hire the team because that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. And that nearly happened with OpenAI last year when Altman got fired by the board, which lasted 5 days, and Microsoft said, no, you're not, because we've got a lot of money at stake here. And they were going to basically take up all the team and move them to Microsoft again, because they got the money. The thing is, it's taking so much time and resources to actually train the models. So the interesting thing for me too is in what you're doing and where we are with generative AI is, do you have, and I use a hybrid of Google and ChatGPT, which is starting to blow me away more and more the more I use it. And do you see a problem with, the big problem was hallucination. In other words, ChatGPT seemed like it wanted to keep the human happy by giving it an answer. And so it'd make shit up, right? Okay, to use an Australian term. And the reality for that is, can you trust the data, and do you validate the data through a certain process?
Yeah, and that is, I think, another key reason why in a market research industry, right, you've got to have an AI plus HI component, because you need proof points of all of these things, and you need the oversight of, and to be honest, if you've got the deep industry knowledge, you've got the deep, the deep understanding, you see the BS immediately, right? When I mean, you kind of see when it's starting to go a little off the rails, but we have to look at it, because imagine we've talked to 1,000 people. We have AI open ends. We've asked questions and the AI is prompted, and we've got all those responses. And now we're going to be prompting AI to do some analysis and help us make sense of all that. We have to be able to validate that. So we have to have mechanisms in place to see where was the origin of those responses, how did that come from? And then the way we look at it is, we're still going to be analyzing some of that data, right, with human eyes, and we're going to be triangulating some of those things. So there can be, over time, there can be things that we can automate the validation of, right? And I think there's been conversations about that with AI. AI might be able to validate AI, but where we are right now, there's a lot of that has to be done at every step along the way. So in prompting, the first time we had AI prompting an open-ended interview, right, conversation, it went off the rails a little bit. Like, it was supposed to be a 15-minute interview, and it just kept asking questions, right? It wouldn't shut off. And so the response is like, whoa, wait a minute, like, it's been 25 minutes. Why isn't my interview ending, right? So we had to kind of figure out, okay, we've got to retrain the model to ask those questions better. So you got that. Then, as I mentioned, you've got the data coming in on the back end, how you analyze that. The other big industry issue is fraudulent respondents. So you think you're sending a survey out to real people, but turns out that there's, bots and fakers out there trying to take your surveys. So we've got to figure out how to use AI to help us find that. But there's a human layer to that too. So everything that we're doing, it seems to require this multi-layered approach. And that's really what kind of got us, the light bulb went off and said, okay, we need to codify this and make it into a solution.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of, you've really got two ends of the market, and the truth's going to sit in the middle with two attitudes and philosophical approaches to AI. One is dystopian and one is utopian. And we've got Hollywood to blame for a lot of the dystopia, not the utopia, because, drama and violence and death and destruction and the end of the world sells more movie seats, right? It's really quite simple, right? So it sounds like Facebook, really. So the reality is that the truth's going to lie somewhere in the middle. And I had the privilege of actually interviewing Nick Bostrom, who's written Deep Utopia, who's a leading AI thought leader and philosopher, along with Ray Kurzweil, who I'm reading his new book, which is fascinating. Singularity is Nearer, which is still to be finished. But Nick Bostrom had these two approaches: deep super intelligence in 2014, he wrote, and the latest one is Deep Utopia. And it was fascinating to interview him, because his approach is very, very left field, and for me, having a big brain, he's a polymath out of Oxford University, and it was just fascinating to see, I suppose, projecting to the future of, what's it mean to have purpose in a world of AI? If AI can do everything, right? If
right.
I if I if AI can write a blog article better and quicker than me, why am I writing? If I'm an artist doing a canvas and the AI can do it better and quicker than me, but that's another story. But it's interesting that you guys have actually launched AI plus HI, which I think is where I certainly do sit myself, in that I see AI as an amplifier and enhancer of our humanity. And sure, we need guardrails. We need to be, checking it for truth, historical facts, and so on. So,
Yeah.
is this what sort of guardrails do you actually put around what you do in using this AI plus HI tool?
Yeah, before I go there, I want to react to something you were saying because I think there is a really important philosophical point here to be made, and that is when I started in market research, right, a long time ago, there was really one goal that my understanding of why the company hired me and was paying me to spend, $1 million a year on market research. And it came down to proprietary insights, right? General Mills wanted to have knowledge and insights into the market that none of their competitors had, right? And they believed if they had those insights, they could develop better products, they could be first to market, first mover advantage, and that's where the profit came. Okay, the profit came from being first to market. Fast forward to where we are now. Everybody can prompt AI with the same set of questions. Guess what? Our role is the same. We have to get proprietary insights for companies that nobody else has, right? And if you just rely on AI and everybody has AI and it's all a level playing field, where's the proprietary? So I think in my mind, right, the goal and objective of AI plus HI is to get that competitive advantage, to get those proprietary insights into organizations. And that has to do with the types of questions we ask, the approaches that we take, the way that we do the analysis. Hopefully, our human intelligence is getting us beyond, right, what anybody else can do. So that's like, to me, I don't know, maybe it's the optimistic utopian side of all of this, is that together we can get somewhere better. But also believing that AI isn't going to surpass my ability to think creatively and or to get to something proprietary that any company couldn't get with AI. So that's, the philosophical piece. The guardrails piece, like where does it go off the rails? It's all the way through, because honestly, it starts with bad data, right? We
Yep.
have fought about bad data from the beginning of time.
Yep.
And insights folks have fought to be farther in the funnel, not data, insights, strategy, planning, right? We're trying to be down this wheel of impact. But right now we're being dragged back into data. Because if the data isn't high quality, you can't integrate it with other data. You can't prompt it with AI and get good answers. So that's the first guardrail, is good data. We need to focus on having good data. And then I think the next piece of it is the interpretation and the context associated with how do you approach that, and what do you do, and what questions do you ask, and making sure that you're validating everything that you do along the way, that what you're getting is not garbage. So it's the garbage in and the garbage out, I guess, is the two guardrails, right? Both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting because I've been using ChatGPT for nearly 2 years. And what's mind-blowing is this has all happened in less than 2 years. We actually haven't. ChatGPT was released to the general world, where it hit global human consciousness rather than the geeks and the researchers in the labs, in November 2022. We haven't hit November 2024 yet. So this has been the pace of this. I've been in tech since 1984, when the IBM PC was sort of launched. The clones competing with that were launched, and I saw the explosion of PCs selling to corporates. Then they were networked, and they were connected to the world through the web. And then we had social media, and then now we've got AI on top of that. I have never seen the pace of change. And so I'm talking close to what, 25, 50, let's do the math, over 30 years. I've never seen this change in over 30 years of being in tech. It's mind-blowing. And the trouble is, as humans, just to try to keep your head around it, like you and I are both working in AI essentially, and I feel overwhelmed constantly.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I write about AI is to try and make sense of that noise and distill it, trying to make simplicity out of complexity, which is we as humans try to do. We're pattern recognition machines that try to distill this noise and confusion and going, I'm trying to find some elements of truth here. Well, for me.
Yeah.
So, and you guys must be, is 1,500 market tech tools on loan. That's mind blowing. So you guys feel overwhelmed sometime in all that noise?
Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. And I think, first thing was trying to make sense of the categorization, right? As humans, we're going to categorize. So of these 1,500 tools, what are the buckets of what they're trying to do, right? And then what are the buckets within those buckets? What are the ones that look like they're most of interest? And then you get to the point, okay, we piloted all of these. We started to work with clients. We started to figure out what we're doing. But now it's like, this does this really well. This does this really well, but we want this. So now it's combining two tools together, which then there's another infinite set of combinations around, right? How you might combine these different tools to one another. So I think it is for sure a sea of ambiguity that I'm swimming through. But I guess that's what charges me up every day, right? I mean, that's the whole reason I got into research. It's like, it's trying to solve problems and to think through and understand all that complexity, and knowing that, I have Richard on my team, or, who that's his job, is to vet all these solutions and to figure all that out. And I don't have to do that, thank goodness. But he also doesn't have time to fill all the gaps and figure out how to productize this stuff. And I'm doing that. And so we all, as a company, I think, have found that the silos needed to come down, and we just all needed to decide, what is it I'm good at? And let's get together and go solve that, rather than saying, this is my box and this is your box and this is your box. And I think that has helped us accelerate our movement through this, is just shedding the silos and figuring it out together.
Yeah. Yeah, because AI is essentially, it's not artificial intelligence. Actually, it's a misnomer. It's actually human intelligence collected by the machine.
Yeah.
So it's not artificial. This is what's this. It's actually. I was reading the other day, and it's something I'm sort of going. It's been misnamed.
Yeah.
The machine is actually making sense of human wisdom and creativity, and we thought, So the reality is that, and what I'm excited by, is that I've got access to a human brain now of 8 billion plus people.
Right.
And all the research by polymaths like Nick Bostrom and Mustafa Suleiman, the entrepreneurs and the philosophers and the Charlie Mungers of the world, that have got great mental models to make sense of the world and made nearly $1 trillion between him and Warren Buffett. But and so inside all this information sits wisdom. And the other thing that intrigues me along with this is that what is truth? In other words, where does truth really lie? Because you talked about words right before, and there's one phrase, was one term that's been used to actually, which really made me really think, is that it's a term suitcase word. In other words, you ask someone what success means. Wow, okay. How many meanings for that word is there if you open up the suitcase of multiple meanings?
Yep.
What does happiness mean? There's another one for you. And you know what? It actually goes on and on and on. And then you've got cultural context. What's love mean? India has, Indian philosophy actually has 5 meanings for love, right? So the word and truth sits within meaning in context, or sits within context and culture as well, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly it. And that's what makes it so difficult. And on one hand, I look at the difference in what we're able to do in an hour versus a year ago. So I have a data set, right, of 1,500 open-ended responses, and a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I would have had to, probably code some of that data in order to try to classify it, right? And it would take quite a bit of time. I still have to do some of that now, but not really, right? Like I can prompt the data immediately and say, okay, I want to know an answer to this question, and it'll show me the answers and the evidence, right? So all of a sudden, like something that took, I don't know, I estimated like 3/4 of my time, right, in analysis could be saved by having this AI assistance in doing the analysis. But it's not zero because, or 100%, right? I can't save 100% of my time because we all see it. We all know it when we ask a question and when we make a prompt, how often, right? It's got to be 20, 30% of the time it's off. Is it off 20 degrees? Is it off 180 degrees? Depends on the question that you're asking. And then the hallucination. I mean, I love my daughter. She's getting her master's degree in biotech, and she was looking for patents, and she went to Claude and said, I'm looking for the patents for blah blah blah, and she came back. She says, yeah, 4 of the patents were real, and the 5th one it totally made up. The patent number, the patent, like the whole thing,
Oh, okay.
completely made up. And so we have to like live in that reality right now, right? And everything we do, we have to be able to think critically. We have to be able to look at the information contextually, and we have to kind of think, right? And so it can't just be, in my opinion, it can't just be AI for everything. There may be some things, some use cases that
Mm.
the accuracy rates are great on, but in terms of market research, there's a long way to go. There's a long way to go, and I think there's a big evolution in play, but you can't just wait. As a researcher or a leader in a company, you can't just wait for it to be perfect.
No.
So you've got to get in the game now and figure out what you can and can't do, and that's part of the fun.
Yeah. Oh, very much. And for me, you mentioned a couple of words there. One was accelerate what you can do in a certain time frame. And on top of that, then I think what AI allows us to do is to amplify our humanity by distilling that through that as well. So maybe we call it the AA process. But the reality with that is that I certainly feel that I'm learning so much faster. My main problem is my memory, as in I'm getting a little bit older. I think, maybe I've got dementia setting. I don't know. But anyway, it's maybe one too many glasses of wine occasionally. But anyway, the reality is that my human memory is maybe the thing that holds me back the most, when I don't have an AI under my arm, right? So yeah, because I'm going,
That's a huge opportunity for an insights, right? If you're on the client side of insights, you're right now trying to gather up all the data in your organization, right? And make it possible for anyone in your organization to prompt that data, right?
Yep.
Because you're not going to remember what everything is or where to find it or what it might mean collectively rather than individually. And so there's just a huge opportunity to be looking at synthesizing across data sets, not just within individual studies. And that's another really exciting area.
Yeah. The other term I want to go back to, which you mentioned, is proprietary. In other words, it's, basically General Mills wanted to actually get insights about something, so they actually had knowledge that no one else had. That's getting much harder with AI now because everyone's got the tool. But when it comes down to, I think there's 2 parts of it to that I find interesting. Number one is I think proprietary frameworks is maybe one place to start. In other words, you at CMB have maybe come up with what you call your own proprietary framework for how you approach doing research that no one else has quite done. And then it also comes down to the other part of that equation too, is asking better questions within those frameworks, because the ChatGPT, if you have an expert who really knows their field, they can actually ask better questions because
Absolutely.
of it. Yeah.
And then the other part of it is that the AI is only good as the data it's being trained on. So there are audiences out there, right, that are harder to find or harder to understand, that you can go reach with custom research still. So there's opportunities to collect proprietary data still. There's opportunities to ask and prompt different kinds of questions that might not be in the data set, or may not be an easy leap for AI to make in terms of a conclusion from the data it has, as an opportunity as well. And I also think there is some creative components to AI too, right? I mean, the ability to visualize things, the ability to, on the reporting side as well, that we're experimenting with as well. And it's really fun to see some of the tools that can enable you to say, okay, I want to create 3 PowerPoint slides on this topic. I want to use this from my data, but I want you to bring in these things from secondary data and have it just create the charts for you, right? And then you can look at it and go, is this what I wanted or not what I wanted? So there's other tools in here too that bring faster visualization, better storytelling, that are kind of a fun part of the journey as well.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think that AI brings to actually the creativity boost and amplification is, as humans, we have been raised in, brought up in a family where there were certain ways of thinking, that we are raised in cultures that have certain ways of thinking. We also gone to schools that have a certain way of thinking. And we end up being this sort of nice little fixed box that doesn't change much, right? Because trying to escape your own thinking is actually really bloody hard.
Yep.
So what I love about AI is you can ask it a question or give you a list or whatever, and it recombines the data and the information in ways that you're going, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask AI to write a questionnaire for you. I mean, it's really interesting because it asks questions you hadn't thought of, right?
Yep.
And then you can look at that versus the questions that you would ask, and you can kind of triangulate into what makes the most sense. But it does. It absolutely is another sounding board for getting ideas.
And so and that leads us into areas like AI agents. In other words, you got to look at AI as almost like your co-pilot, which is interesting because that's what Microsoft named one of their products.
Yep.
And I really like that approach, actually. And for me, it's like, I don't feel threatened by AI. I'm excited by AI. I think AI can make me more human by breaking the bonds of my own fixed thinking, which has been generated by decades of sitting in a dark corner, eating a sandwich and looking at my screen. So the reality is, and I go to cook and I'm going, oh, I've done this like this for the last 20 years. It's like, chicken sarde. And I'm going, oh, my partner sits next to me and going, oh, you can put some capsicum in, you can do this, you can do that. And going, all right. So our human friends and partners actually break those ways of thinking. AI also helps us do that.
Yeah, I actually had the good fortune of doing an interview with Kajali, who is the director of insights at Microsoft, and she talked about um, Copilot being particularly named because humans still need to be the pilot. And then she also brought up the idea of like, this is not, AI is not meant to be on autopilot. So I thought that was a clever little twist of words there. But I think there is a lot to be said. AI agents really actually fascinates me, and it's an area that I see a lot of potential for as well in market research, because right now, imagine some of the sophisticated analysis that we do. And I'll just go back to the very beginning of our conversation when I talked about that, asking the similarity of cars and then creating a map and segmentation, right, of different types of cars and where they're. We do a lot of types of advanced analysis, right? So say we'll survey 3,000 people and we'll start to create segments of the market, right? We don't just run that through one algorithm. We might run that through 3, 4, 5 algorithms, and then we'll interpret. Okay, this came up with a 5-segment solution. This came up with a 6-segment solution. This is based on more behavioral data. This is based on more attitudinal data. And we'll start to triangulate to say which is most useful, which is going to help the company make better decisions, which is going to actually help drive market penetration or whatever the objectives of the segmentation are. Imagine if you had an agent helping you iterate through that, right? I mean, there are things that could drive efficiency. It could help new possibilities, new ways of thinking in combination with traditional advanced analytic models So there's just so many interesting applications, I think, for AI and for these AI agents as we start to train them up to have them do particular tasks for us.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like it's like going to a smorgasbord, and it's so overwhelming you don't know where to start sometimes.
I agree. I would say that there are more ideas, not only on my head, but kind of like in our repository at CMB than we have time to go after, right? So we're having to choose, like, where do we start? Where do we go next? And it's a blast. I mean, in my mind, I guess I could have a dystopian view of my job somehow going away, but I don't. I just have the perspective of insights needs to adjust, and your job is going to go away if you don't adjust.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, is we have to be learners. And it used to be we could go to school and then we could work and apply and have a career doing the same thing. I don't think that's the case anymore. I really do think you're going to have to reinvent your skill set. And I don't think that's going to stop. I don't think that's just this moment in our history. I think that that's a change, and it's a change for the next generation to contend with.
Yeah. And the thing is no quote, so done is better than perfect. And that's where we're going to start from and have some fun along the way and continue to be curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just a quick thing. Can you take us through quickly, and then I'm going to ask you a question about what brings you deep joy and happiness. In other words, what would you, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day? But that's going to be the last question. So I'll let you just let that just circulate in your brain. Just take us through, if someone's going to use the AI plus HI process, if you're taking a client on, how does the process work? I'll be just a quick thumbnail sketch of how you are using this.
Yeah, so the process works, I mean, in many ways similar to traditional research, in that we talk to the client about what they're trying to accomplish, right? What impact are they trying to make in the marketplace? And based on that, what types of decisions might they be trying to make? We're also going to look at the time frame with which they have to make these decisions. And we're going to look at that and we're going to say, okay, how might we approach this research? And I would say maybe 2 years ago, that would have been, I'm going to do a set of qualitative interviews, and then I'm going to follow it up with a survey. And now it might look like we're going to run these things simultaneously. And some of it's going to be AI and some of it's going to be human, and it's going to get done, probably a little bit faster. And by the way, now we're going to have all of a sudden some more insights that came out of this because we were able to talk to, say, twice as many people in these little subsegments to supplement what AI can get us. And now we're to this new place. So the client isn't really having to do anything different. I say the other part that's different is the analysis phase. So it used to be we collect the data, we'd analyze it, and then we put a report, we put it in front of the client and say, here you go. Now it's more like you're collecting the data and you're synthesizing it at the same time, right? So by the time you're out of field, you already can sit down with a client and not only look at things, but explore the data, ask it questions, see what you're learning, and start to think ahead a little bit. So you may be thinking more about activating the insights and how you can translate and teach in the organization and move forward, a little bit less about how do I analyze the data, right? Because that can happen a little bit more instantaneously. And then I think the other part that's changing is the storytelling that goes along with it. As I said, what it comes down to is how do we learn? We don't learn by seeing a lot of data and facts. We learn by seeing it interpreted. And Gen AI gives us the capability of saying, what are the implications of this in new ways and visualizing that in new ways. So I think there's also what we're seeing is a change in our organizational culture to saying we're delivering insights, to saying we're delivering activation of insights, right? So we're helping the teams figure out how to use the data and make decisions and do things, rather than here's a report, now you go think about what it means. Yeah. And I think that intersection between insights and strategy is going to completely blur as we continue to move forward. That's kind of going to go away, and that's definitely a huge implication of AI plus HI. But I think we're still in early stages of making that all a reality.
So how much time do you think you're saving to get maybe a better result?
At this point, it feels like in some cases we're saving that 20, 30, 40% time. In some cases it's zero time because we're spending a lot of time validating, we're spending a lot of time doing things in a redundant way. So I suspect it'll get better as we go, but it almost feels like it's just a shift, like you're investing your time later in the process or at different points in the process, and you're getting to a different outcome than it is, hey, this is just faster and cheaper.
You feel like you're getting better insights?
I do. I think that, and not only better insights, but better insights at scale. So sometimes things that we would only be able to do among a small audience, we're able to kind of get a larger audience response to. And so that example of that event, right, that you want to go inside and ask people questions, now all of a sudden you're able to go to executive leadership and say, yeah, we were able to talk to 2,000 people in 2 hours, and here's the ROI of what you're doing at this event. Is way different than we pulled aside and we did all these one-on-one conversations and we have 15 people and here's what we found. Like complete night and day difference, right? Yeah. In the validation and accuracy of what we're able to get. So I think there's just big differences in the deliverables that come out of doing this kind of work.
Cool. Exciting times, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot of fun.
So my last question, which I ask people, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day, even if you weren't paid for it?
This is a really hard question for me. And I say that because my husband says, you love what you do, and you love what you do so much that work is your hobby. And it's not intended to be my hobby, but honestly, like I love getting up in the morning and reading LinkedIn and finding that nugget of information. I love reading the Wall Street Journal every day. But I also love to bike and hike and draw and play cello. And I have like other interests as well. But I don't know that I'll ever want to stop thinking critically, being curious about business, seeing where the world is going, right? And being a part of the change. I guess for me, that is just, it's part of what makes me feel alive.
Okay, so let me sum that up, hopefully, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong or close. So you're a curious cat, you love learning, and you want to keep growing. And that's what you find exciting and wakes you up in the morning. Is that correct?
Yep, that is pretty much it.
Cool. Well, I think curiosity is actually a word that's not used enough and not explored enough. I think being curious, that's what gets me up, is just reading and learning and then trying to make sense of it. I think for me is like I've had, the morning I'm feeling a little bit flat or something from the day before, whatever, and you read something going, but then when I start writing and then trying to make sense of it, it's sort of like it just dissipates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's something about the space between two, like I like getting on an airplane to travel because usually by the end of the flight, whether I've watched a movie or distracted myself, like all of a sudden the light bulb goes off, right? Like you get in the shower when you wake up in the morning. I love those moments when your brain isn't focused on work, right? It's focused somewhere completely different, or I'm off on a bike ride, whatever. And all of a sudden all the dots just fire, right? And you have that like, that just makes my day.
Yeah. Well, that's how symphonies are created. It's the space between the notes.
Love it.
Monika, it's been an absolute joy to have a chat with you. And I am fascinated by AI plus HI because that's where I'm curious about. And I think we're in the most exciting time of history. And we really don't know where we're going, which actually is one sense is good. And I think we're just going to lean in with, I think, I think, positive and optimistic, curiosity, but with our eyes a little bit wide open to make sure that we don't take the world down a polarization and a fake news, that's been done by social media, not having the guardrails, and it needs to be put in place. This needs to be put in place. We should learn from history and realize that, the kumbaya of social media that started in, 2007, 8, whatever, started human consciousness, needed a few little guardrails to keep us happy. So I think AI needs the same thing. And because we've got a great tool, we need to make sure that we use the tool instead of being used by it. And that's what social media has done. And it's great. But there's also, if any technology can be used for evil, it can be used for good. And that's what we're going to make sure we continue to use it with. So, Monika, thank you very much for your insights. And I look forward to hearing more about AI and HI, plus HI, and maybe chat in a year's time and see what you've learned along the way, the intersection of humanity and the machine. So thank you.
Sounds great. It was really great chatting with you, Jeff.
Thank you, Monika.